How is this guy not in jail? I think to myself, as yet another YouTuber drops yet another 90-minute documentary about yet another lolcow that I'm a little bit surprised people are still making videos about at this point. Who's the real lolcow, chatter? Obviously, we're talking about EDP445, one of the most notorious figures on the internet for being somebody who is so openly engaged with being in love with minors in one way or another. And I do not mean that jokingly in the way that you will hear about people talking about Minecraft YouTubers being the like. No, this is dude who takes pride and satisfaction in exclaiming that he is attracted to 13 and 14-year-olds, and even got caught trying to solicit sex from one while claiming that he was only there for a lovely cupcake. In what world is this guy not only not in jail, but somehow more popular and on the tips of everybody's tongue than ever? If you guys aren't aware, documentarian Mike Clume just released early last night his documentary covering the story behind EDP445 and his rise and fall from grace as the internet's he's always just kind of been somebody people laughed at for being a loser, but like in a completely different way at this point. Similarly, he released a very well-regarded video about Boogie2298564, whatever, that fat guy who drinks the Cheetos. And that got like millions and millions of views. And he released a trailer just a few weeks ago saying that he would be doing one on EDP445. And everybody was very interested because when he did his documentary on Boogie, the story basically told itself. He spent the better part of several weeks just hanging out with Boogie and really just let him tell his own story about his life and how he became such a lolcow figure on the internet. And the fact that EDP445, somebody who has mostly been shunned by everybody on the internet and has been drama farmed to death because the dude is really from his creation a lolcow. He was never anything but somebody that people laughed at. He was never really like the most lovable, interesting character at any point in his career, the way that Boogie was. The fact that this dude would decide to sit down and have an entire documentary made about his rise and fall, his life, when it ultimately just culminates in being one of the most prolific pedophiles on the internet, at least as far as memes and internet culture goes, second to only maybe Dr. Disrespect. I mean, we're setting really high bars here, and I'm surprised this guy can stand up for more than 45 minutes. Mike Clume releases this documentary early last night, and everybody ends up watching it. It's currently sitting at 800,000 views, which is really good when you consider that Moist Critical's video released several hours later, is sitting at 1.1 million views. You know your documentary's good when you can get a fraction of the views that Moist Critical can get talking about your documentary. I don't understand how this website works sometimes, dude. I first heard about this documentary because the trailer was released a week or two ago, 2 weeks ago at this point, to 1.6 million views. And this is the second installment by documentary Mike Clume, the first of which was on Boogie. And it seems as though he's got a bit of a knack for letting these lolcow mythical figures that have just been ridiculed and memed to death in one way or another, sort of just tell their own story. Kind of like the documentary Senna, except if Senna wasn't an F1 driver and was instead really fat. That's kind of Mike Clume's expertise here. And the fact that he's now doing a follow-up video on EDP445, somebody who had been all over news cycles with the whole cupcake debacle, I'll explain in a second, really raised a lot of people's eyebrows. I was made aware of this trailer during my live stream. We watched it live on my live stream. And I thought to myself, is this a good thing? Because while Boogie2298 has like an entire legacy, before he was this dude that people laughed at because he was such a sad character, a lolcow, somebody who was milked for content because of how sad and depressing their life was, Boogie2298 had a relatively normal career. He was making sketch comedy. He was the big fat funny dude. He had the character Francis. There is actually a little bit of an arc there. But for EDP445, his entire existence was mostly just talking about being addicted to pornography and jacking off. The most prolific of his memes, the most popular of his videos was the epitome of just a dude being weird on the internet, and the fact that it culminated in him being caught trying to solicit sex from a 13 or a 14-year-old and then trying to weasel his way out of it. It just seems like a story that doesn't need to be rehashed. I mean, if there isn't any extra information about this, are we not just giving more attention to somebody who ultimately never really deserved it in the first place? Since then, I decided to watch the Boogie2298 documentary, and I realized that Mike Clume actually has quite a gift for documentary telling. The story that Boogie2298 just basically blew through all the money that he did when he was super popular on YouTube, and is now in a situation where he doesn't really make any sort of content that's going to get millions of views, and now has to sort of go through the grind of just making videos in order to make rent, and as a result ends up sort of begging for money and doing crazy things and getting into more and more nefarious podcasts and situations just to make the headlines, to make the bills due, actually has quite a bit of nuance to it. There's something quite interesting about watching Boogie tell himself how much money he's spending on prostitutes and on Magic the Gathering cards, and just how sad his life has become now that content has become less of a blessing and more of a chore. And the fact that Boogie himself is telling this entire story to Mike, and as a result sort of narrating his own documentary showcasing the entire livelihood, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I recommend you watch it. And the EDP documentary acts exactly the same way, except where you kind of end up feeling bad for Boogie the entire time that he's going through this. It almost, I don't want to say like redemption arc, but like there's an energy about EDP, probably a misguided energy in this, I will come back from this, I will rise above all this stuff that's pushing me down, that really shouldn't exist in an individual that is just unapologetically still interested in minors, still addicted to pornography, still fat as hell. I'm a little bit surprised that this much energy was put into a documentary about this dude. But after watching it, I can concisely say I'm weirded out. So if you're not familiar with EDP 445, super quick crash course on what is basically the rise and fall of one of the memes on the internet. There's 1,000 examples of this. Honestly, there might be more examples of the rise and fall than just people who got famous for a meme and then didn't end up being super weird or annoying 5 or 10 years down the line. There's probably a lesson in there I should pay attention to. Originally, EDP 445 was just known as the fat Eagles fan. That's sort of it. Eagles fans are always sort of recognized in the NFL community as being a little bit over the top, a little bit overly passionate about their team, a little bit overly aggressive when it comes to being an Eagles fan. And I think EDP 445 embodied all of the worst characteristics of your typical Eagles fan. And as a result, when he made these very, I don't know how to explain it, like bare bones, passionate, just balls to the wall, I'm gonna turn on a camera and speak my thoughts into the internet. This very early internet style video making that he did caught a lot of attention. He claims that his first channel, EDP 445, Eat That Pussy 445, quickly grew up to like 3, 4, 5 million subscribers, simply because he was making these videos just recording himself saying things along the lines of, do y'all consider jacking off a sport? And whatever else that has launched him into meme stardom. Now, for the most part, that's pretty much anybody knew EDP 445 from. He is the equivalent of like a reaction GIF. You type in, I want a funny reaction, I want a funny sound bit that I want to send my friends on Twitter or on Discord. EDP 445 is going to have some sort of video amongst the thousands that he's uploaded that has some crazy shit that you might send your friends in a group chat. That's more or less about as famous as he got on the internet up until the cupcake incident. The cupcake incident is a situation where some predator catchers, these are people who make YouTube videos along the lines of Chris Hansen, and try to catch somebody who is attempting to talk to or solicit sexual favors from an underage person. They'll create sort of a sting operation, pull up chat logs and proof that they were under the impression that they were sexting with a minor, and then basically just try to expose them on camera for clout or what have you. Generally speaking, even when Chris Hansen was involved, a lot of these don't actually hold a lot of litigious validity, that being, they don't actually go to court and get these people arrested super well, because generally speaking, when you throw a bunch of amateurs together putting together a YouTube video catching someone doing a crime, they usually aren't following the law in a way that will work well with law enforcement, and that's sort of the situation that happened with EDP here. So these predator catchers set up a situation where I don't remember if they actually got in contact with a 14-year-old or if they were pretending to be a 14-year-old, but they pull up to EDP as he is on his way to meet up with this 14-year-old. And very famously, they say, hey man, we caught you, blah, blah, blah. What do you have to say for yourself? Why are you here? Is it not to meet a 14-year-old? And he very famously claims, well, I was just here to pick up a cupcake and then head home. Nothing more than that.
Go ahead. Well, I was actually coming out here to pick up a cupcake and then go back home. There was, nothing that was going to be sexual involved. because I'm not like that. You know, well, obviously the text messages and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
The documentary breaks down the entire story of what happened there. Evidently, EDP had blocked this individual and then started re-talking to her again due to a lack of any sort of social interaction. This is a very common thing you'll hear amongst both child predators and just incels in general, is nobody would talk to me, and then the second that I got any sort of social interaction, that person became my everything and I would do anything for them. Eventually, he agreed to meet up with this minor because she claimed that she had baked him a cupcake and her grandma was out of town and she had the house to herself, blah, blah, blah. And we get the very famous, I'm just here for a cupcake, totally not here to solicit sex from a minor clip that you may have seen because I made a dozen videos of it back when it happened. At this point, I believe all of EDP's social media was more or less banned. He was banned on YouTube. His entire channel has been deleted. The only remnants of any of the videos that he had uploaded previously exist only as Discord MP4s or people re-uploading archived videos of his. At that time, there were a bunch of re-emerging channels by EDP. You would see every other week for a little while, EDP has returned, EDP is back to making videos, he's got a whole nother channel. I believe sometimes they would get banned and sometimes they wouldn't, but for the most part, that's all anybody heard of him, until effectively the exact same thing happened again. EDP was once again soliciting some sort of information, some sort of pictures, some sort of talk that was inappropriate with a legitimate, real 15-year-old who is in the documentary speaking her half of everything that happened. This time it was being goaded on by another YouTuber by the name of Gideon in an effort to once again just milk more content out of this sad loser individual. It once again resulted in Gideon and some other individual meeting up with EDP, once again confronting him about the chat messages that he had with this underage individual, and once again resulted in absolutely no police involvement and no jail time. Why? There's a reason that people say you should leave it to the police, because in this situation, from all of the Reddit research that I've done, evidently this is known as entrapment. When it comes to soliciting this sort of conversation with minors online, it can only be prosecuted if the perpetrator, in this case EDP, messages the minor first. And evidently in both of these situations, he was messaged first by the underage individual, and evidently that means you can jack off on FaceTime, describe explicit actions that you want to do with this individual, and even go so far as to try to meet up with this underage individual in real life, and evidently that just can't be used as evidence in court, which feels a little backwards, but apparently that's the case. Now, I did not even know that this happened twice. I for some reason, I thought both of these instances was the cupcake incident and just mashed together two completely separate stories that have happened. So I'm glad some people take the time to put together videos on YouTube that actually get the facts right. I will learn to one day. One very interesting thing I learned from this EDP documentary is his name, Eat That Pussy 445. If you guys pay attention to this you don't need to pay attention to the documentary. They'll make it very clear to you that EDP has a very serious pornography addiction and evidently has his entire life. And he said he had just finished jorking it when he decided, hey, I want to make a YouTube channel, and decided that he needed his name to be sexually explicit to match his persona. And so he decides to name it Eat That Pussy, which is where he gets EDP. But then he decides that he needs some numbers after it for it to sound cooler, and he says that he tries 555, 631, and they just don't sound right. And allegedly, his own words, right after deciding that he couldn't think of a cool enough number, he went to weigh himself, saw that he weighed 445 pounds, and then decided, yep, that's the number I'm going to go with. I want to be Eat That Pussy 445, and I just think that's legendary. Give it a couple more years, we could have had EDP 456. We could have had Consume That Coochie 694. I don't know how heavy he is at this point, but one day we will get the legendary Vacuuming That Vagina 1000. That's going to be a day in history. Something I find fascinating and obviously like morbidly disgusting is just how unapologetic EDP is about his involvement with minors. One would think if you were going to make a documentary about a lolcow like this, they would go along the, I thought they would go along the lines of like the old Shane Dawson documentaries, where he would find these people that have big negative aspects of their presence on the internet, and then sort of show the backdrop, the backstory, that there's more to their character, blah blah blah, whatever, as sort of a redemption arc for like all the people that Shane Dawson made documentaries about. But when it comes to EDP 445, it just gets worse and worse. Like I said, at least with the Boogie documentary, you kind of felt bad for the dude and saw how bad he was struggling to make rent and find any sort of passion in his life now that he's sort of fallen off a cliff in terms of relevancy. But EDP has a sense of like misguided optimism. Not only that, but his unapologetic energy for continuing to be interested in minors just blows my fucking mind. Like, he talks about the incident with the cupcake situation as like a bad mark, something that was bad at the time, he has learned from, he recognizes that it's bad now. And then he just continues to talk about how, yeah, who wouldn't want to sleep with a 14-year-old? What kind of man doesn't get excited about that? He's having sexual role plays with AI chatbots, and the director asks if they can say, what are you chatting with these chatbots? And he goes, oh, I don't want to share it on the camera. You know, it's crazy stuff. You know, we're doing age play where they're like 15, 16 years old, and it's like, oh, okay, so you just haven't learned anything. You're just never gonna get better. You have this opportunity where this entire documentary is narrated by you, and you're just gonna continue to be a piece of shit on what might be the biggest platform you're ever gonna get again. Okay. I think the documentary is a good watch. It's one of those things that's probably going to unnerve you a little bit just because of how gross of an individual EDP is in a number of different facets. But I'll have the documentary linked in the description. You guys should give it a watch if you're into that sort of thing. It's a very fresh video. By the time you're watching this video, that video's been up for less than 24 hours. Check it out. But I do think, like, to my first concern of whether or not this is going to be a piece of media that is designed to try to make light of an individual that definitely doesn't need any sort of benefit of the doubt because of the sort of dark, twisted individual that they are. And on top of that, are we just rehashing an already buried story and giving attention to somebody who absolutely does not deserve it? I think hit or miss a little bit on twofold. On one hand, the fact that the entire story is completely more or less driven by just EDP telling his own side of everything. He does admit to a lot of his wrongdoing. He does admit to a lot of the fucked up shit that he does and, looks down upon his actions. But then, like, in the same breath, in the same video, right, he's still talking about how he wants to meet up with minors, how he hasn't grown past any of that, how he thinks it's right, how he idolizes Andrew Tate and hates on all the YouTube commentators that have taken the time to talk about how disgusting of an individual that he is. It definitely feels like he hasn't learned anything, but it's something about the fact that he himself is saying that, uncoerced, just given a flat platform to say whatever he wants to, and then decides, I'm just going to be the worst individual to ever exist on the internet, is it's like watching a car crash in slow motion. It's fascinating. Do I think this is going to do more harm than good? Like, do I think more people need to be aware that EDP is a twisted individual? Not necessarily. It's not like he ever had any sort of inherent benefit to the internet aside from making some shitty memes about being addicted to porn and jacking off and what have you. He's had some funny sound bites. But if EDP never existed on the internet, I don't really think we would be missing out on that much. So to that regard, it's like, do we need to give this guy a platform where he's going to be in a documentary talking about his life to millions and millions of people? Is this an inherent good? Do more people need to hear from EDP? Overall, probably no. But I think the fact that it already feels like he's taken this opportunity and just completely crashed and burned with it by just being himself, maybe shines a light on the right aspects of his life, which is all of the worst aspects of his life, which is every aspect of his life. It's weird because you would imagine that after hearing everything that I've told you, and perhaps after watching that documentary, one would think that this would be a story about how the law has failed its ability to catch somebody who definitely belongs in jail. Why is an EDP in jail? After all the times that he's very clearly tried to meet up with underage individuals and continues to enjoy trying to put himself in situations where he can communicate with underage individuals, shouldn't this guy be arrested? But it's something about the fact that he's so unapologetic about his pursuit in such that it really makes you feel like this guy's gonna get his comeuppance one of these days. Like, this very much feels like somebody who is definitely going to just get worse. And I guess we all just have to sit around and enjoy the ride until that inevitably happens. which I guess my life is boring enough to find that interesting. Hopefully yours is too. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe. It helps a ton. I'll catch you guys on the next one. We might be watching the documentary live on a live stream right after this because I got no sleep and I have nothing to do the rest of the day. So maybe see if I'm live streaming a reaction to that documentary. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. Spisu.